Have you ever heard the story of a great flood that wiped out almost all of humanity, with only one family surviving on a massive boat filled with animals? Of course you have. It's one of the most famous stories in the world. But what if I told you that the story of Noah's Ark isn't the only one? In fact, it's not even the oldest. Long before the biblical account was written down, the people of ancient Mesopotamia were telling a strikingly similar tale. This is the story of Utnapishtim, the man who survived a world-drowning flood sent by angry gods, a story preserved for millennia on clay tablets. Today, we're diving deep into the Epic of Gilgamesh to uncover this incredible ancient legend. How did Utnapishtim learn of the coming disaster? What did the gods command him to do? And what secrets did he learn on the other side of the flood? Stick around, because this is a story that changes how we think about myths, history, and the shared tales of humanity. The story begins with our hero Gilgamesh, the king of Uruk. He's on a desperate quest for immortality after the death of his best friend Enki. His journey takes him to the very ends of the earth, searching for the only man who was ever granted eternal life, Utnapishtim. After a long and perilous journey, crossing deadly waters, Gilgamesh finally reaches a mysterious island and meets the legendary flood survivor. Gilgamesh asks him the million-dollar question: how did you, a mortal man, find a place among the gods and gain eternal life? Utnapishtim agrees to reveal his secret, and so begins his incredible story. He starts by saying, "I will reveal to you, Gilgamesh, a hidden matter, and a secret of the gods I will tell you." He explains that he was once the king of a great city called Shirpuk, situated on the banks of the Euphrates River. It was a bustling, vibrant city, but it was also noisy. The gods who lived in the heavens above grew incredibly annoyed by the constant racket of humanity. The noise was so bad they couldn't sleep. The chief of the gods, a powerful but short-tempered deity named Enlil, became absolutely furious. He decided he'd had enough. His solution: to wipe out all of humanity with a devastating flood, complete and total reset. However, not all the gods agreed with this drastic plan. One god, named Ea, was the god of wisdom and water. He was known for being clever and also had a soft spot for humans. He couldn't directly defy Enlil's command, but he found a clever loophole. Ea went to the city of Shirupek, but instead of speaking directly to Utnapishtim, he spoke to the wall of his reed hut. Wall, 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 wall. Listen, reed hut, and pay attention, wall. In this roundabout way, he passed on the secret warning. He told the wall, which Utnapishtim could hear, about Enlil's terrible plan. He commanded Utnapishtim to tear down his house and build a boat. But not just any boat. It had to be a gigantic cube-shaped vessel, an ark of immense proportions, with its length, width, and height all being equal. He was to waterproof it with bitumen and pitch, load it with the seed of all living things, and take his family, his craftsmen, and his gold and silver aboard. Essentially, Ea was telling him how to save the world in microcosm. Utnapishtim was, understandably, a little concerned. He asked Ea, "What am I supposed to tell the people of my city? If they see me tearing down my house to build a giant boat, they're going to ask questions." Ea, ever the trickster, gave him a clever excuse. Utnapishtim was to tell the people that he had angered the great god Enlil and could no longer live in his city. He would claim he was moving to live with his patron god Ea in the watery abyss. He was even to say that once he left, Enlil would shower the city with a rain of abundance and prosperity. It was a brilliant deception, making the people think his departure was a good thing for them, tragically unaware they were being left behind to face their doom. So Utnapishtim got to work. He gathered all the craftsmen in the city and they began construction on this massive, unprecedented vessel. The Epic of Gilgamesh describes the building process in detail. They laid the keel, built the frame, and constructed 7 decks inside. The ship was massive, and he paid the workers handsomely with food and drink, as if it were a festival. He loaded it with everything he could, all his gold, all his silver, his family, his relatives, the craftsmen who helped him build, and as instructed, the beasts of the field, the wild creatures of the field. He was ready. Then the storm came. The moment Utnapishtim sealed the door of the ark, the sky turned black. Terrifying storm, commanded by the gods of destruction and weather, unleashed its fury upon the world. The epic describes the scene with chilling power. The dikes of the land were torn out, it says, and a roar like a bull filled the air. The flood was so powerful and so terrifying that even the gods themselves were scared. They fled to the highest heaven and cowered like dogs. The goddess Ishtar, who was a goddess of love and war, cried out like a woman in childbirth, horrified at what was happening to her people. She lamented, "How could I have commanded this evil in the assembly of the gods? How could I have commanded this battle to destroy my people?" The gods wept with her, filled with regret, but it was too late. The destruction was absolute. For 6 days and 7 nights, the wind blew, and the floodwaters submerged the entire world. The storm flattened everything. On the 7th day, the tempest finally began to subside. Utnapishtim looked out of a window, and all he could see was water and silence. The epic says, "I looked at the face of the world, and there was silence. All of humanity had turned to clay. The bustling, noisy world that had so annoyed Enlil was gone, replaced by a quiet, muddy sea. Broke down and wept, seeing the devastation. His boat had come to rest on the peak of a mountain called Mount Nisir. For 7 days, the ark remained lodged there. To check if the waters had receded, Utnapishtim decided to send out birds, an act many will find familiar. First, he released a dove. The dove flew around but found no place to land, so it returned to the ark. Then he sent out a swallow. It too came back, unable to find dry land. Finally, he released a raven. The raven flew off, and it didn't return. It had found food and a place to rest. This was the sign Utnapishtim was waiting for. The water was finally going down. He opened the doors of the ark and released all the animals back into the newly cleansed world. To thank the gods for his survival, he prepared a sacrifice. He made a large offering on the mountaintop, and the sweet smell of the sacrifice drifted up to the heavens. The gods, who were described as being starved after the flood, gathered like flies around the offering. It was at this point that the drama among the gods flared up again. The goddess Ishtar arrived, furious with Enlil for his reckless destruction. Then Enlil himself arrived, and when he saw the boat and realized that some humans had survived, he was enraged. "What living thing has escaped? No man was to survive the destruction," he roared. The wise god Ea stepped forward and confronted him. He rebuked Enlil, not for punishing humanity, but for the sheer scale and injustice of his punishment. He said, "On the sinner imposes sin, on the transgressor imposes transgression. Be gentle, lest he be cut off. Be patient, lest he be dislodged." Ea argued that there were other ways to control the human population: lions, wolves, famine, or pestilence, but a flood that killed everyone. The innocent along with the guilty was too much. Confronted by Ea's wisdom and the shame of his actions, Enlil had a change of heart, came down to the ark, took Utnapishtim and his wife by the hand and blessed them. He declared, "Hitherto, Utnapishtim has been but human. Henceforth Utnapishtim and his wife shall be like us gods." He then granted them the one thing Gilgamesh so desperately craves: immortality. He sent them to live far away, at the mouth of the rivers, to live forever. This is the end of the story Utnapishtim tells Gilgamesh. So, what does this all mean? The similarities to the story of Noah's Ark are impossible to ignore. A divine warning about a world-ending flood. Command to build a giant boat, saving a family and animals, sending out birds to find dry land, and making a sacrifice after landing. However, the Mesopotamian version is significantly older, with parts of it dating back to nearly 2000 BCE. This suggests that the flood story was a powerful shared cultural memory in the ancient Near East, passed down and adapted over centuries. But the differences are just as telling. The reason for the flood in the Gilgamesh epic is petty. The gods are annoyed by noise. The hero is saved through a trick by a dissenting god. The gods themselves are shown as flawed, fearful, and regretful. It's a very human portrait of the divine. This ancient story of Utnapishtim does more than just tell a tale of a flood. It explores timeless themes of life, death, divine power, and human resilience. It reminds us that our most famous stories often have deep ancient roots connecting us to people who lived thousands of years ago, who looked at the sky, who feared the power of nature, and who told stories to make sense of it all. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey back to ancient Mesopotamia.